So, I've got a few things that I'm going to talk about. One is sort of going out of your comfort zone, which I think as chefs we do a lot. I think on one side of cooking, we always like to take ourselves out of a comfort zone, and whether that's in the cooking that we do, or whether it's going to another country to cook. To begin with, I think a lot of us have a journey that we take, and why we become a chef. There are many reasons for me why I became a chef. I think there's a journey, as I said, that we all take to become that chef, and the people that we meet, the journey that we take. And I think it's very interesting, talking to a lot of chefs here, what moves them, what made them become a chef is very interesting. This here is, I guess, a very small synopsis of my life from when I was a child to where I sort of got to, what I went through, and then I guess sort of, the whole journey of it. Some of you may know I have a twin brother. He's a chef as well. He's taken a very different approach to me. He lives and works in America. But really what fueled that from, us sitting at that table, I think we're about 3 there, very mischievous, redheads as we are. Again, a lot of things being said about family, sitting around a table, eating, discussing, arguing, crying, having fun, all digging into one pot, enjoying good food. And as you can see, it was very much, a part of our family life. And part of that family was my mother, who's here, with my other elder brother. Again, another question that chefs ask, who influenced them? Mothers, I think, play a big part of our lives, and bring us up, hopefully putting us on the right path. And my mother definitely played, a big role in that. She was definitely instrumental in who I am. And one of my fondest memories of growing up, I grew up in Norfolk, which is the east of England, very well known for farming, agriculture, great seafood. But my one sort of defining sort of picture of her is in the kitchen, cooking, in the gardening. She was very hands-on. We and my twin brother, we did a lot together, some good, some bad things. But she taught us, some very simple principles. We started gardening at a very young age, sort of almost, I think we were like six years old. She took us into the garden. We grew everything from raspberries, we had a pear tree, we had an apple tree, we grew carrots, we grew cabbages, we grew potatoes. And that for me was, it was a seed, the seeds that she put into the ground. We grew them, we looked after them, we loved them. We then took them home into the house and we cooked them. And for me, that was kind of, a first insight into food and where that journey began from. There was a lot of things that, that I learned from my mother. She made, chutneys and jams and pickles, and, she made milk bread on the weekends, which is a special treat. And then, from there, I also very fortunate as well. My father, although he couldn't boil an egg to save his life, still can't. He was involved in the wine business. So he did a lot of traveling. We didn't see him very often because he was, he's very much sort of involved in his work, traveling. He went to France a lot. So, as kids, we didn't really see him very much. But saying that, another journey, was going to, luckily for me, going to France when he was on business and school holidays and visiting, some amazing places. And again, it was sort of, stepping into that and really understanding the whole culture of food and what it meant, to people outside, of the UK, in France. And it struck me that it was really deep-rooted in their culture, in terms of who they were, how they felt, how it touched them. And, obviously I was still very young, I'd never seen such love and such passion towards food. And over the course of time, my father, he spent a lot of time in one part of France, the Auvergne, and we would go there on holidays a lot. And again, we were in this tiny little community, probably about 3-4 houses. We knew all the neighbors. Monsieur Brujaille, Monsieur wasn't Robuchon the chef, but Robuchon, he was a farmer. Every morning we would hear, him milking his cows at 4 a.m. And then time for breakfast. We would go up to that farm. We were only then, 13, 14. And take a pail and go and get 1 liter, 2 liters of fresh milk, warm, with about 2 inches of lovely double cream on it. And I tell you what, it was amazing. You could actually just go up to a farm. He was a very, super friendly farmer. And he would just give you milk, just like that. So we'd take the milk back. And I think it was Philip Howard that said, cornflakes. Cornflakes is one of those memories for me that I had of having it with that, with that milk and that thick, thick cream that I'll never forget. It's a very simple thing. Cornflakes, milk with lots of cream. And again, it was another moment in my life that, that sort of planted that seed about, this is amazing, this food, this culture, and it was another step, I think, into me becoming a chef. My twin, as I said earlier, he played a big part in my life. I was lucky. He was, being a twin, he's more than a twin. He's more than a brother. He's your confidant. He's your best friend. And a way of the two of us, as I said, we did everything together. The good, the bad, with girls, sometimes. And again, I had to thank him because, again, it was a defining moment in my career. When I was at school, I was probably, if I remember rightly, 12, 13, I decided, that I was going to be a chef at 12 and 13. I didn't share that with my parents because I think they would have been absolutely bloody horrified at the thought. But because of that, and I was at a very, very average school in Norfolk. I wasn't aspiring, as my father wanted me to do, go and sit behind a desk and work in an office and, write or whatever, or be behind a computer. That definitely wasn't for me. And as I said, me and my brother, we had decided to go on this journey at 12, 13 to be chefs. So at the age of 12, 13, I rang up the local college, which was in Norfolk, a very good catering college, and I think, it still is. And I rang them up and I said, just inquiring, I'm leaving school. I was obviously lying, I wasn't leaving, I was still at school. And I said, what qualifications do you need to be a chef? And they said, well, you don't need any qualifications. You just come, have an interview, meet us, we talk, and we'll say if we like you or not, and you can come in. So I thought, great. No more revision, no more exams, no more, working on the weekends, revising for end-of-year exams, and I thought, this is great. So anyway, over the next, 3 years, I then sort of flunked school. Parents got more and more worried about what is my son going to do. I go to the parents' evenings that they do at the end of school, and the results are getting worse and worse, and what am I going to do with my son? Anyway, so at the end, I left school, no qualifications. I think I got probably the highest grade was a CSE in geography, grade C. The rest are all, pretty miserable, Ds and whatever. And then I said to them, don't worry, mother and father, me and Rob, we're going to be chefs. And you should have seen their faces. Jesus Christ. It's something like someone had slapped them with a wet fish. And we were like, yeah, we're going to be chefs. It's going to be great. It's going to be fantastic. And their horror, they were like, what do you mean you're going to be chefs? And I think, judging by the expression on their faces, they thought that, we were going to be flipping, burgers, I don't know, or something at McDonald's. But I assured them that our aspirations, were bigger than that and more than that. So anyway, so they went along with it. We went to college. And as I said, my twin brother, he was always there for me. He was the bigger than me. He always was. So he looked out for me. And as it happened, sort of 3 months onto that course, one of the teachers who actually interviewed me, he came up to me and he said, Mr. Aikens, I'm watching you. I said, what do you mean you're watching me? He said, well, when we took you on this course, your twin brother, Rob, he had an amazing interview, and you had a really bad interview. And, just be warned that I'm actually watching you. And it wasn't for him, you wouldn't have been on this course. I thought that was a really nice thing to say to, an aspiring student, to give them real confidence. So I actually turned around to him, and me being, I guess quite cocky that I was, at 16, I just started the course. I said, well, actually, as it happens, in 10 years' time, you're going to know who I am, and I'm going to have a name. So there. And anyway, so I went through college, did really well. Mother and father were actually proud. And me and my twin brother, we were, I guess, in the sort of top 2, 3 students on the course. So, hey, we did well. And that, from there, was the start of the story. But then after that, I went to London. I came to work in London. And again, trying to get into, restaurants in London, and this I'm talking of 1989, 1990, so, fair amount of time ago. We only had, some real superstar chefs, in London. You had Nico, you had Kaufman, you had Marco, you had the Roux brothers. And that was probably, it in terms of, the Michelin sort of restaurants. And that was, for me, really where I wanted to go, and that was my dream, and that's what I wanted to do. So how to get into these restaurants. So, they had waiting lists to get into. They had, lots of chefs wanting to go and work with them. There I was, fresh boy out of college from little Norfolk and Norwich, wanting to go and, play with the big boys. And so I asked my father, what should I do? And he said, well, I'll tell you what, why don't you just write some letters off to them and see who answers back? And so I sat down with him. He came down to London, and we went through a load of different restaurants guides and sort of looked who I should write off to. And so I wrote off to about 30 different restaurants and hotels, and pretty much probably 20%, 30% wrote back. The others I didn't hear of, and all they said was, really sorry, you don't have enough qualifications, you don't have enough experience, come back in 3 years. Boom, done. So I then sort of scratched my head and thought, what the hell am I going to do? How am I going to get into these restaurants? What am I going to do? So anyway, I wrote back to, the probably about 15, hotels and restaurants. And I said, look, I already wrote to you once and you said no. So what about if you give me a chance and I will come and work for you for 6 months, no pay. And if you like me and if you think I work hard, then give me a job. And surprise, surprise, I only got 3 responses. And again, it was, I just couldn't believe it. I thought the fact that I'm offering, my very immature and unknowledgeworthy and and unskilled labor that I was, but I was offering my work, for free of charge. And one chef who responded was David Cavalier. He was actually next to Christian Delte, who was a one-star, and on the Queenstown Road as well. And he responded and said, yeah, I'd love to give you a job. Come and work for me, 6 months. Anyway, so I did. And again, that was another defining moment in my career. And David, I went and worked on the veg section, peeling lots of vegetables and turning lots of carrots and everything, as you did back then. But it was an amazing experience. You got to sort of, it was a tiny team. There was like 3-4 chefs in the kitchen, and I had to say, David was a little bit mad. I think as quite a lot of chefs were in that sort of time. But, you got the excitement of it, you got the energy, you got the passion, you got the understanding of why chefs were working those crazy hours, and sort of, taking the shouting from the head chef. The team that were there, they were committed to what they did. So I worked there for 6 months, and David kind of, I guess, took me under his wing. And in a way, I sort of got the whole reason, as to why we were doing this, and he kind of, I think, treated me a little bit different. And I later found out that because I wasn't, obviously getting paid. And then that changed dramatically when, when it came to the end of my sort of 6-month probation, and I started getting paid, and then it rapidly changed. And again, it was a defining moment in my career. I couldn't stand it. He treated me very differently. The whole sort of emphasis on me being there and what I was doing changed. The pressures, the stress, all of that, it just, I couldn't deal with it. And ashamedly, not a lot of you know this, but I wrote a note and I put it in the fridge and I said, I'm not coming back. I wasn't a very good communicator, so I just thought it was at least the decent thing to do was to write on a piece of paper and tell him I'm not coming back anymore because I can't take it. So I did that, and I was then sort of, I'd only been there like, I don't know, 3 months, not even. Anyway, so that was obviously definitely before the era of the mobile phone, so he couldn't call me, which was good because I didn't leave him my mobile number because I didn't have one. Couldn't text me. But I had given him my home address. And of course, he sent his wife to come and find me. So that was like, probably like 3-4 days after I left. Anyway, so left a letter through the postbox from his wife, Sue, and said, come on back, David wants to talk to you. And I was like, oh, God, this is just so embarrassing. I left, there's a note in the fridge, and yet he still wants to talk to me. I mean, my God. So this is crazy. Anyway, so I went back and saw him. And again, it was a defining sort of moment. And he just said, look, I see something in you. Come back. And I thought, really? Me? From Norfolk? And he said, yeah, come back and it'll be all different. It'll be change and, be more love and everything. Of course there wasn't. I mean, it was still the same. But the fact that he believed in me to what the teacher said, complete opposite, I thought, wow, okay, he believes in me, fantastic. So I went back, and of course, I stayed for just over a year. And it was, I guess you could call it, fatherly son kind of chat, and it worked. I mean, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't, if it wasn't for David taking me aside and giving me a little fatherly chat. So I then went, after that, I then asked David to take me to this lovely man here, Pierre Kaufman. And again, an amazing man, passionate as hell. And his style of food and philosophy and thinking was very different to others. His flavors were big, bold, hearty, gutsy flavors. He wasn't all about, the pretty, princey sort of details, Definitely no tweezers in those kitchens in that time, that's for sure. And I learned a lot from him, just in terms of, the flavors and his beautiful Gascony cooking. The other one was very different. Joel Robuchon. Amazing kitchen, amazing man, amazing team. We had 60 covers in that restaurant and as many staff, 30 in the kitchen, 30 in the front of house, and it was quite incredible. He was all about the intricacy, all about the details, all about the product, the produce. I had never, ever seen such amazing produce as this. Then after that, I then stayed in France, for almost 2 years. I went to work in another place in Reims, Gérard Boyer, and at that stage, I got a phone call from this chap up here, David Moore at Pied à Terre, and he said, "Come and work here." And there's an opportunity. Richard Neat is leaving. I was then only 25, and it had already existing 2 stars in the Michelin Guide, and I thought this is an opportunity that I cannot miss. So I then went. I was there for 5 years. I worked my butt off, that's for sure. And I was there for 5 years. And whatever reason that I left under there, it really sort of gave me an insight into who I am as a person. And I definitely left under a cloud of I wouldn't say great things. JP mentioned about chefs with egos. That was definitely me then. I seriously had a massive ego, and the ego, I would say, took me out. And then I had, in a way, had to sort of eat a bit of humble pie, and I did. I sort of, looked at myself and see where I was and the journey that I'd taken and where I wanted to go. And one of the major things that sort of changed me in my sort of chef of where I'd come from was sort of relations to the people that I was working with, suppliers as well. And the suppliers that I built up over 5 years, working as a chef, I kind of really didn't have any real connection with them. And as again, Claire, highlighted that about having real relationships, with your suppliers. And it dawned on me that, as opposed to just, calling a supplier on the end of the phone, have a relationship with them. And then so Daylesford here was another part of my career where I went to work, yes, privately as a chef for a lady called Carol Bamford, who has Daylesford Organic. But then I said to her that I wanted, this was back in 2000, that I wanted to understand, what farming meant. So I worked on a farm for a year. I worked in an abattoir for 2-3 months. I saw, obviously, animals being killed and how they were slaughtered, and I helped to butcher them. And so I did that for, pretty much a year and a half. And then we got on to something else. And in that time that I was working on the farm, I had, obviously, this sort of magic moment where the link between me as a chef and what I was cooking was completely missing. And these people that were growing and making and producing amazing produce that I knew nothing about suddenly gave me, inspiration more than I could ever imagine. And I think as a chef, we're very fortunate to be here, that's for sure, but to meet all sorts of different people, different suppliers, different producers, and everything that makes us who we are. And the moment that I, was in that, I had the idea, sort of few further on in my career, about Tom's Kitchen. And as you can see, Tom's Kitchen that I had opened in 2006. Whilst I was ongoing with Tom Aikens, was really all about that. It was about the simpleness of food and where it came from, and having that special relationship with your suppliers. And I have to say that it was again special to me that I could then share this with other chefs. And I think that sort of the big move in food in London was sort of definitely from, I guess, 2000 onwards, when when we were starting to get really good quality food in London. from our farmers. So I'm going to run out of time, aren't I? God. So one of the big things that I wanted to get onto, and I'm not really going to have enough time, but one of the things that the challenges that you face as a chef is expanding into other countries and going out of your comfort zone. The challenges that you have to face, what you're up against, embracing cultures, embracing history, embracing their foods, embracing the people, is so important. I'm very fortunate that I've had the opportunity to go into other countries, but you have to dive into it completely, submerge yourself in it. And we've seen chefs much better than me, that's for sure, that have gone full swing again with what JP said, with their egos and saying, this is who I am, this is what I'm going to do, and they wonder why they fail. And the idea, does it work? The team. We've heard many chefs, talk about, your teamwork. These are just little things about, what I consider importance in terms of what you define as your restaurant, what you're going to do, fast food, your inspirations, the team, the right food, reviews, service, all these things that I guess we take for granted are then completely different in another country. Okay, the chef's dilemma of food sourcing and produce. It's very difficult again. About sourcing foods from other countries, and how does it get, to get to that country, but the food that's in that country, how does it get to you, and how does it grow? Because unless you're actually living in that country, or you have a good team on the ground that knows where everything is coming from, it makes the choices very difficult from a consistent supply, but also the quality. So when I go, as I said, when I go to other countries, I try and submerge myself kind of into everything, from culturally, locally, the people, and obviously ask a lot of questions. I speak to a lot of chefs, and I think the power that we have as chefs now, and social media has played a massive part in that, in terms of connecting with chefs in other countries, has really helped. So this is a new one that I'm doing, literally in a month, and it's a very very simple idea. And again, when I was thinking about this sort of concept, it struck me that China, being the largest consumer of pork that it is, there wasn't a single sort of pork restaurant, and it kind of hit upon me that here I was, a British lad in China wanting to do a concept based on pork. I don't know how the Chinese are going to feel about that, but anyway. So I was looking at this, and again, the root of being able to do a concept is adapting to the country. And number one is in this criteria is source of ingredients and where that comes from. Unfortunately, I again, through the power of Google, found an extraordinary man in the New Territories called Waki Farm, who is a second generation sort of farmer. His parents before him had a chicken farm, and he thought it was a great idea to blow that all out of the water and do a pork farm. So I met up with him, and I discussed the sort of the concept with him, and he then discussed sort of the processes of how he became a pork farmer. And I'm going to be 1 minute. Anyway, it's very interesting because then as a chef, you know, you learn so much, and this is the other exciting thing about going to new territories and everything, that as a chef, you always want to improve. We always want to learn. We always want to go forward. And just listening to him, his passions, and the story of how he got, you know, to making this amazing pork was truly inspiring and fascinating. And you know, he got a PhD in mechanical engineering, yet he still decided to be a pork farmer. He studied at the Imperial College. He got his PhD in mechanical engineering. His parents retired. They closed the chicken farm, and then he wanted to be a pork farmer. So he came over to the UK. He studied about pork breeding, and he met with lots of different pork farmers in the UK. And then, this is the early part of the 90s, he then brought over 5 different breeds of pig to China, the new territories. And over the course of 10 years, he then bred his own specific breed of pig. And it just goes to show that, you know, with suppliers and with chefs, there is, you know, there's this bond, there's this engagement, and interest. And again, you know, learning about pork, I learned, you know, many different things. I mean, just out of interest, you know, they slaughter the pork, they butcher it, as you can see here, straight away. You know, that pork I took a picture of was, you know, they slaughtered them at sort of 6 o'clock in the morning, and then that was about 10 a.m., all broken down into different joints and different cuts. Never seen that before. And he said the reason that they do that is obviously they like their meat fresh, but they also like, you know, to have the texture. So again, as a chef, you know, it's amazing just to learn these new experiences. I'm just going to go on to the next one. Anyway, there is a whole other realm that I'm not going to have, you know, time to discuss, which is about food travel, food miles. It's, you know, it's there. It's a problem. I think, you know, as chefs, we're all responsible. We all love our craft. I mean, you look around in this room and you see how much care that there is, how much love. And I think it's the love that we all have that we can all make a change. Everyone in this room is driven as hell, passionate as hell. And I think chefs, you know, we all have a voice, we all have opinions, as you've seen. And I think we need to make those opinions heard more. You know, look at the power of social media and what, you know, we can all change and really, truly make it happen. I couldn't believe when I came here and for the first symposium, this is the response from you guys and the people that are here is mind-blowing, considering this is the first one. And it just goes to show the power of passion and what it means. And again, you know, this is me in my own little world, and it relates back to the whole story of where it all began for me, of my mother in a gardener, sharing that with me, sharing a seed, sharing an idea. And again, all these little pictures are here of some of the, I guess, good things that I grow and probably some of the not so good things. But as I said, you know, it's all about what we can aspire to and what we can do. Thank you.